But protests are always dismissed, diminished, badly reported upon. What's left? Their democracy, along with everyone else's democracy. That's what democracy means. By the time these people realise that what they're dealing with is bigger than a caricature, it'll be too late. There has never been a plan for dealing with the Trump phenomenon, or levers, or any other populist uprising in the modern era. All our leaders have come up with are strategies of suppression and containment, combinations of policing, surveillance, censorship and propaganda. And even the propaganda is mostly just mocking. I don't believe I am right-wing. I also don't think those labels matter anymore. Right-wing, left-wing, it's the angel in the middle that matters. It's the crow between the wings that's important to us, and it's important that we keep our conversation going. Who knows? There probably are members of that protest that hold some pretty crazy views about all sorts of stuff. But if we continue to delegitimize an entire movement, how are we going to get anywhere? And in fact, isn't condemning an entire group because of the behavior of one or two individuals one of the key components of bigotry and prejudice? Oh, well, all people from this place or appear in this way or identify in that way are like this. No. Over and over, we're told the one thing we need to know about the opposition is that it's insane, wrong, and won't get anywhere, which brings us back to the Freedom Convoy. Virtually every news story that's come out about the Canada protests has focused on bad behaviour of individual protesters, or polls showing their supposed unpopularity, or news linking leaders of QAnon and the vaccine scepticism, and even Holocaust denial. Editors now routinely make sure that the word convoy is surgically attached in headlines to delegitimizing rhetoric, as in The Independent's Freedom Convoy pushed by QAnon, or NBC's As US Truckers Convoy Picks Up Momentum, Foreign Meddling Adds to Fray. Wow, it's almost like there are a set of pre-existing narratives that can be bolted on to delegitimize any protest. To me, what it seems like from an overview is democracy has become tainted. You can't get any access through democratic means by voting because you know by now that both parties are completely controlled by lobbyists. So you protest in order to have your voice heard. But protests are always dismissed, diminished, badly reported upon. What's left? They won't rest until nothing is left. That's why this has to be effective. That's why this convoy has to be successful. Not just for people who agree with them, but for all of us. Because the alternative is the closing down of legitimate means of protest. I'm not saying there aren't people in any protest that are bad actors. Of course there are. In any room with 100 people in it, you're going to get all sorts of variety. But the fact is that if 90% of these truckers are vaccinated, it ain't anti-vax, it's anti-mandate, and they do have the right to protest. Centre-left leaders around the world seem more interested now in defending the principle of not listening than in the practical question of amping down tensions, a logistical problem that in this case needs to be solved somehow sooner rather than later. A mass covering of official ears while shouting QAnon Holocaust derp isn't going to get it done, and sending in the military is pretty much guaranteed to work about as well as it did in the Middle East. What's happening in Canada and other countries seems less about specific demands than about the general principle of being listened to. Leaders like Trudeau could likely make this thing go away if they'd make even a slight gesture towards the idea that legitimate differences of opinion exist on questions like mandates, vaccine passports, surveillance tracking, lockdowns, the vaccination of children, and other matters. You don't have to agree with people, just find a way to look at them without betraying your profound regret they were ever born. The longer this convoy phenomenon goes on, the clearer it becomes that none of the leaders involved knows how to do this. They're not choosing to govern without listening, they just don't know any other way. But there has to be another way, doesn't there? And we have to find that way. We have to abandon labels, we have to abandon judgment and condemnation. And the more you disagree with what someone is saying or what they appear to believe in, the more important it is that you come to them with an open heart. We have to create new systems of communication, new systems of democracy. And what we can see from the truckers, the reporting on the truckers, and the behaviour of government in countries where protests are becoming popular is you will not get that change within the current systems. So it necessarily has to come from outside it. It is also important that we as individuals remain open-minded, open-hearted, free from bigotry and prejudice. No room, no place for that anymore. We have to reach out lovingly to one another and participate in new forms of protest, always peacefully, of course, new means of democracy, always representative, of course, and new ways of communicating, always with the admission that we have our own prejudices, flaws, and challenges, but we enter into discourse with good faith and open hearts. Do you think this could be a global movement? Could we be changing the world forever? Do you think it's possible for governments and the media to start approaching these protests in a different way, more open-hearted?